Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Lionel Sander from Pembroke Publishers. Before we start, I would just like you to know that Pembroke Publishers' head office is situated upon traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha First Nation, Alderville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty covering this area of land in Toronto, Ontario is collectively known as the Williams Treaties of 1923. And I wish to recognize the significant contributions of Indigenous peoples across this land. We seek a new relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, one based in honor and deep respect. Welcome, everyone, to our session this evening. It's great to have you here. Just a quick outline of our agenda for the next hour. We are going to have Larry Swartz, our first presenter, speak for about 20 minutes. And then our second presenter, Dr. Andrew Campbell, or Dr. ABC, will continue on for the next 20 minutes, both of them talking about their new book, Stop the Hate, for goodness sake. And then we'll have time for questions at the end there. So if you do have any questions while the presentation is going on, please feel free to drop them into the chat, and I'll be monitoring that, and I'll bring those forward for you at the end. For those of you that have not met Larry before, I would just like to give you a little bit of background for him. We've done many webinars together, so I think, Larry, it's fair that I can call you a friend now, and you're host of many different webinars. Larry is currently a literacy and arts instructor at OISE at the University of Toronto. And for the past 40 years, he's been a classroom teacher, a consultant, a workshop and keynotes presenter, both nationally and internationally. And just a couple months ago, I had the pleasure for the first time of seeing you present, Larry, at Reading for the Love of It, and share your passion for books in a room of, 150 or 200 people that were just eating up every recommendation that you had. I know that you're also committed to helping teachers choose and use quality children's literature to deepen their understanding of social justice, diversity, and equity. So Larry, welcome. It's great to have you here, and I will pass the virtual mic over to you.
Great. And just the slideshow, we can begin. Thank you, Lionel. I always feel safe when you're here. So is the slideshow? Okay, wait, back up. We're ready to begin. Okay, thank you very much for, I'm really excited about this. And this book is very important to myself and Andrew. And my little presentation is going to give you an overview of the book and some insights and raise some questions. Please put your questions in the chat room because we'd love to chat given the time. But there's the cover of the book. And it was a title that we came up with, and Erasing Hate, Disrupting Hate, and we come up with Stop the Hate, and that punchline, for goodness sakes. Next slide. So you'll also see in tiny print, the book is intended, How Can Classroom Teachers Disrupt Discrimination, Promote Hope, Foster Healing, and Inspire Joyful Learning? So it is about disruption, it's about hope, and it's about joyful learning. So that's the subtitle and the main overriding principles of our resource. Next. So here's an overview of the book. These are the chapter overviews. Now, it's interesting. I do have to give shout outs, and both Andrew and I have many shout outs. And, we can't do every name of the contributors to the book, but Kat Motitsuni, the editor of our book, I mean, it was a good book. It was good, but Kat made it a great, great book. And when I look at this table of contents, she shifted things around. We had 12 chapters, 10 chapters, and she did a brilliant job of sympathizing it. Chapter 1, I think it's important to define hate, help students understand what the word means and the different variations from I hating broccoli to hate crimes that are happening in the world. And so we have some activities that promote that. Recognizing hate sort of gets right to the issues. We have anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism. So we looked at some issues, and we had some expert voices contribute to each of that. each of that chapters with some personal stories. So that gets to the meat and helps the kids understand what those and teachers to understand the terminology. Dismantling hate in schools means what is the place of hate in our classrooms? How can we disrupt it and dismantling it within our classrooms, with individual students, and within the school community? So we have chapters 3 and 4 is ways to erasing hate. So the practical lessons that address that. We put a chapter on bullying here. Much of my work, I've done many workshops and written resources about bullying. And the chapter in Kat actually challenged us to think about how does bullying hate relate to hate, and how does hate relate to bullying? Well, a bully, it doesn't always hate their victims. So, and the victim doesn't always hate the bully, but of course we're looking at issues about relationships with bullying. So we felt it was an important chapter to go in, and really important to wrap it up, creating safer school cultures for all. So what can we do, the activism component, to move forward in this, not just from reading and talking about it, but moving forward to action. And Andrew did a brilliant job, which he's going to address today, 10 tips for disrupting hate. So that's the overview of what the chapters contain. The features of the book. Next, Daniel. Randall. We have perspective voices. Very, very grateful for people, our colleagues who contributed to this, some experts in the field who have written about it. And again, I can't read all the names, but we felt it was really important to bring authenticity. And we are very grateful for the expert voices that not only appear in chapter 2, but throughout the book. And again, as I say, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I have to give a shout out. Karen Mock, her work has been mighty work in human rights consultant, and we had some good conversations. And she wrote a beautiful piece on combating inequality and supporting Jewish identities. So her commitment to conquering anti-Semitism was really important for her book, Karen Mock. Asim Hussein represents, I just want to give you a few that represent. He wrote a beautiful piece. Listen to this question. Is it possible to make a difference against Islamophobia, even if it's not your experience? Another colleague of mine, he has developed a beautiful website, Islamophobia.io, which shines a light on Muslim and Islamic cultures. And in this work, he invites people to tell a story to save a life. It's a global website that looks at homophobia. Our colleague Mary Reed raised a beautiful question. Is it possible to make a difference? Those are questions that we would raise throughout our book as she addressed anti-Asian racism. And Artavenes Andrade, using your power to create safe schools, another important title. And we looked at Lindsay Cavanaugh and allyship with 2 SLGBTQI students. So I recommend those represent, and I wanted to give a shout out to them and thank them for their work. And those perspective voices will inform you and move you forward. And Andrew might give a shining light to a couple of names as well. So perspective voices, really important, personal narratives. So in chapter 2 in particular, for each of the issues, we have people tell stories, but we also, I did some work. I went into about 10 to 12 classrooms for grades 4 to 8, and I talked to students to share their stories. I'll give you a taste of that as well. But the personal narratives were important, and there's a practical nature. So the theory to give you information, but I put 20, I never know if it's 25, 27, but 25 plus lessons that can be adapted to different grade levels to make this work lift off the page. You're not going to get a book without children's literature recommendations. I think there's picture books, nonfiction books, both for young people and also middle-aged students and young teenagers as well, and children's literature. So that's filtered throughout the book with book lists. You're not going to get a book from Larry without a children's literature thrust. Reproducible masters that can be shared in the classroom, and tools that support teacher. Throughout the book, we have definitions, quotations, references, and a glossary to provide you with some information. So there's an overview of the features. Simply put, the next slide, Andrew, you need to gain information. So if I want to choose any of these issues, it's important to gain information and statistics. We were challenged in this book because statistics keep changing. What's at the top of the list today in terms of hate crimes might be different, for different communities, but also in terms of the years that pass. But we know at the top of the list is anti-Black racism and Black Lives Matter. Certainly homophobia has been at the top of the list, and what's shining in our community now, I use the word shining because we have to pay attention to anti-Semitism, which is now climbing to the top of the list. So we were challenged with giving statistics, but there isn't a day in our news where we don't have an issue that deals with hate. And how do we make this aware to our students? So we need to gain information and then gather resources, whether it's a piece of children's literature, whether the students do research for Google, whether the book that we give you provides resources. It's really important to use those resources to invite students to share their thoughts. And how do they share their thoughts? We have to provide strategies. So my literacy world, we either read, we write, or we talk. We read more about the topic. We provide opportunities for them to write in different modes, and we also and reflect on the issues, and we provide opportunities for them to talk. So discussions, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's student with teacher, or that whole class community. Those conversations are vital to understanding. And important is being an ally, an advocate, or an activist. How do we put these words into action? So there's an overview of what we need to do to stop the hate. I chose these statements from the book. The next slide. I think we have to enrich communication skills so students feel comfortable enough to share ideas and prod each other to think, to question, to explain, to predict, to wonder, and grow. And I think each page of the book brings that to life. Raising those questions, interrogation, explaining, and of course, making connections. We have to have courageous conversations so that braver spaces are fostered in classrooms, not just the classrooms, but outside the classroom and hallways and in the communities and perhaps in the home. So those courageous conversation and braver spaces was something that Andrew and I strongly believe in. And recognize the power of disruption, which was taking intentional action to fight back against societal norms. So that's in how do we disrupt this? What is disruption? Do the students understand that? And how can we intentionally invite students to take action with norms that are marginalizing certain populations? There's a handful of goals and explanations of things that we need to do. I wrote a book with my colleague Kathy Lundy, which we're proud of, Creating Caring Classrooms. This is a number of years ago. And Kathy brilliantly talks about issues in her book, Teaching Fairly in an Unfair World. So I want to borrow her quotation from our book. Some teachers might say that they don't have time to do this, that it takes too much planning, energy, and time away from the real purposes of education, to teach the curriculum. So next slide, Lionel. So that's her quote. And Kathy argues, it can be argued that creating a culture of caring is the curriculum. That italicized is really important. So of course we're busy in our curriculum, but where do we find time to bring these issues into our classroom, to have those courageous conversations? One of the activities in chapter 1, and it was something I did with kids, is what does the word hate mean? And when in my chat with Lionel before this session, I said, let's face it, we're never going to stop the hate. Hate is in the world, but I think we really want students to understand what is hate and how does it help me with relationships and being a caring citizen of the world? And what can I do to disrupt hate if I am a victim or target or the instigator of hate? But I think it's really important to do that. And I think we've got to have the kids define definitions. Since I've been working on this book, I've been conscious, I don't know about Andrew, but baby, of using the word hate. I was on Broadway. I was not on Broadway, but I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, and I saw several plays. And I came away from the play and I sent my friend and I said, I hated that play. And I said, oops, I promised myself I'm not going to use the word hate. I was handing something over to my admin assistant, and I said, she's going to hate me for doing this. And a colleague walked by and said, that's a pretty strong word, but we do use that word. We do hate. It's in our vocabulary. And I ask kids to think about the times they have used it and things that they do hate, whether it's a television program or whether it's a subject that they hate or a sport watching or a food or a color. The hate is in our vocabularies, but I wanted the students to define hate. And I asked the kids, without going to Google, how would you define it? Their voices will speak loudly. Next slide. These are grade 6, 7, and 8 students. Hate is a word normally used with anger and negativity and power. I like that student got the word power in there. A grade 8 student, a strong dislike that sometimes leads to violence or crime. Sometimes leads to violence and crime. So with the word dislike, many students in their definition use the word dislike, sometimes leading to violence and crime. Hate is something that commonly results in pain and emotional hurt. So looking at the kinds of hurt, physical and emotional. When you absolutely despise something or someone and you think that life would be better without that thing or person, that's what that hate means to that grade 8 student. And the student in grade 7 said, something you feel when you don't love yourself. So they moved it on many different levels. Let's look at the words, but ask the kids what they think hate is. That is one of the activities or one of the lessons. Another lesson that I investigate in going to classrooms is draw a picture of hate. If I was, and I only use black markers and white paper in a very quick, spontaneous time. And they didn't have to do a literal picture. What does hate look like? Let's see some images that we put in our book. Next slide. Is that the world talking? Is that bad language coming or offensive language coming out of the world's mouth? Look at the sad face, happy face, actually the neutral face because it doesn't have a frown with the words, I'm fine on it. Next slide. A jail of hate. Look at those bars, just repeating the word hate over and over again. And this person has these lines that are sort of oppressive lines with the wording. So if we were in a workshop situation, I would have you draw a picture or an image. Some students move to abstract qualities, very profound and revealing to share those images of hate. The next one, personal narratives, is the strength. And I wanted to highlight as one of the lessons. And really, I mean, this is the one that really gets to the heart. It's one to read the stories of the others in literature. It's one to look at the media. But every student that I talked to, over 200 students, grade 4 to 8, they had a story about hate. And in the literacy world, it could be text to self, a connection. How does this relate to you or someone you know? It might not be something that happened to them personally, but something that you know. Again, everybody who's listening to us today has a story about one of these topics, a story about racism, a story about anti-Semitism, a story about Islamophobia, ableism, classism, homophobia, and transphobia. I put those on the same line, Andrew, and bullying. So I gave the students that you could just assign one if you want to focus on an issue, but I gave the students a choice. Do you have a story about? Now, how you do that in the class, I have a belief that they have these stories in their head. The trick in literacy is to have them to reveal those stories. The trick in our classroom is to build that trusting environment where they feel comfortable to share their stories. So who is the trusted audience? If I just put up and had a group of students in front of me and said, who has a story about Islamophobia? Some kids will put up their hands, some kids won't, because we're in a whole class community. But turning to a partner, meeting in small groups, and maybe talking to the teacher one-on-one, and then revealing in the whole class builds that community of narrative, and those stories help reflect on how we can deal with the issues. So it's important to have that trusting audience. And I love when the student says, oh, I don't have any stories. Well, why don't you listen to the stories of others? And I bet your stories will emerge. Stories beget stories beget stories. And again, for the whole webinar, I'd love to read the stories, but I went into the book, and here's some stories. Of course, we have some from adults, but the kids say it best. Listen to these stories that are in our book. A student tells a story with someone shouting at her, "Put on your mask, you Chinese virus." So this grade 7 girl heard somebody shouting that at her. An indigenous man, this is from an adult colleague, sat in a university classroom, and he listened to somebody stand up and say that the scooping of indigenous children never happened. And this person had to sit there. The professor said nothing. A clerk in a store is harassed, struck in the head because the customer noticed his Jewish name. A story of anti-Semitism. A grade 7 boy comforted his mother, who just arrived home weeping after being on public transit and silently listening to racist remarks hurled at her. Nobody on the bus did anything. A grade 5 girl afraid to go to school because she was the target of body shaming. 2 grade 6 girls who were harassed because they wore a hijab. And several students told stories about being made fun of their lunches. A 13-year-old boy told a story for being teased because he was called a Jew boy by the students in his class. And we even have Steven Spielberg. I saw this in the New Yorker, and he talked about when he went to high school, how his Jewish name was mocked and how that has stuck with him all these years. I hope he doesn't sue me for putting in the book, Andrew, but we gave him credit. And so personal narratives, we can't stress enough. Each of you has those stories that you can tell, but putting them in writing has a nice collection, and we got to learn from these stories as well. Moving along, I'm just going to take a few minutes. What if scenarios? What if you were on a school bus and you witnessed someone making fun of a girl wearing a hijab? What if someone in your school calls that a homophobic slur every time they pass you in the hallway and you hear them giggling? What if you arrive at school and notice someone has painted a swastika on a locker near yours? What if your cousin tells you that he was bullied at school because he wore nail polish? What if you hear someone say, "I'm not racist"? So we have an in-depth look at what if situations and what would you do situations. Those case studies provide ammunition for conversations. And as I say, we're moving along. Lionel, you're not going to not hear about children's literature. It helps children make connections, helps to resolve problems, raise questions. We can find about the identities and culture of others. And each of the books that we share provide a narrative case study to explore the issues. And they serve as artifacts for response and reflection. I talk about that just as a promo here. In the next slide, teaching tough topics. I just finished teaching a course tonight, a session, and we were looking at the issues about moving towards social justice and equity. There's a little plug. And also, I'm giving you a handout today with some book lists, and you're welcome to go to my website, Dr. Larry Recommends, where once a month I talk about books, and some of them deal with multicultural issues. So just a taste here. Next. There's many lists in my book. This slide shows you representation of Canadian picture books. So When We Were Young by David and Robertson was a Governor General's winner, and it looks at this girl who encounters her grandmother and has questions about her past as in residential school. So that curiosity. The Brave Prince is me, Kathy Kaser, the treasure of looking at anti-Semitism and the Holocaust situation, wrote this picture book, The Brave Princess. Princess Alice was a deaf princess in Greece who took a mother and daughter as refuge in her home. And Princess Alice was Prince Philip's mother. So it's Prince William's grandmother. My Skin Brown, another shout out to Awesome, who wrote this book about a boy or a student who was teased by a slur because of his skin, and a sky blue bench from a friend of mine, a Sky Blue Bench, another award winner, this girl who wants an education in Afghanistan, except she's disabled. And how can she fit into the classroom? Well, the students solved the problem by creating a Sky Blue Bench for her. So there's representation of picture books. And how could the novels, just next slide, Lionel. If Give Me a Grade 6, 7, 8 Classroom, Gordon Corman's Linked is a must read. My niece, who's a teacher in North York, she ordered 20 copies of this in hardback for her students. On the opening pages of the book, a boy found in a small town in the United States finds a swastika painted in the walls of his school. Ghost Boys, a boy on the opening pages is a black boy is shot by a white policeman. The boy goes up to heaven and looks down on the policeman's trial. Answers in the pages, David Levithan looks at homophobia. This is where the banning of the books in a grade 6 classroom, where the students love the book, but the parents are worried because the characters are gay, and even looking at Angie Thomas's title, The Hate You Give, who looks at Black Lives Matters for older students. And the next slide, I just want to represent these. I'm collecting a lot of books with anti-Asian racism. You must read anything by Kelly Yang, her Front Desk series. Finally Seen was her most recent book. It knocked me out, looking at anti-Asian racism in a community in the United States. Maisie Chen's Last Chance learns about the history of her family in a small community in Minnesota and the many meanings of Mayland. She goes to school, she goes to a new school, and the principal says, I don't think we should call you Mayland. It's too hard to pronounce. We should call you Melanie. So the racist in this book is the principal as she tries to accept her identity. One more book in the next slide. Second Story Press did a book for students, addressed to students about hate. What does hate look like? A nonfiction resource from Second Story Press. So that's another slide. And I want to give another shout out. I must give a shout out to Margie Wolf, a friend and a colleague. But this all began with a conversation in a sunny summer day. We were having lunch and she says, I think we need a book about hate. And then Mary was sitting beside me and I says, Mary, I think you need a book about hate. So the seeds were planted where Margie Wolf, a shout out to my friend Margie. And just to finish off with quotations that we have in the book, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. We have quotations spread throughout. Each of those inspires thoughtful reflection. And I introduced this, I argued with a separate page for this quotation. Sometimes all you hear about is hate, but there is more love in this world than you could possibly imagine. So let's balance it out. That's from the picture book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. Sometimes all hear about is the hate, but there's love in the world, of course. And we have a page in our book, which is a synthesis of our beliefs. And that's the next slide. Next slide. Okay, I'm sorry. There's the slide of sometimes you, and we have that on a separate page in the book. Thanks, Kat, for allowing that. And one more slide. We put this in the book because it synthesizes our beliefs. We have to acknowledge the hate. We have to brave the hate, confront the hate, disrupt the hate, erase the hate, and for goodness sakes, the next slide, we have to stop the hate. That's one of our goals for our book. And if you look at that list here, an ABC list for stopping the list. Now, I put this slideshow together the other day, and I went back to it in the middle of the night, and I want to give you one last slide to finish off my part and segue into Andrew. So there's a song from South Pacific, the musical. The musical was written in 1949. The year I was born. No surprise, I'm 73 years old. Is that, anyways, and it's South Pacific, and it's about racism, and it's about mixed marriages, and they couldn't accept it. And one of the characters say, I can't believe that she was born with that hate in her. I can't believe that people are born with hate. And of course, Rogers and Hammerstein go into the song. You've got to be carefully taught. What a nice way to end my part. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. Thanks for listening to me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Larry. And I see the love. Continue, everyone. Center in the love. I see the love. And it is a work, it was a work of passion and was a work of love and absolutely amazing. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Larry, for inviting me on this project. And I'm the kind of person, I see a lot of community members and they know me. I'm that person who speak up and speak out, because I believe even when it comes to hate and inequity, there are so many times we get the opportunity to speak and we did not speak. And so one of the things I want to say is to say thank you, Larry, right here. Thank you for inviting me to do this project with you. So I like to share these. These are things that people, I realize when it comes to academia, we don't want to always say and we don't share. I believe in that, to say I am a part of this project because Larry invited me to be a part of this project as well. And I want you to understand that, because when we talk about equity and inclusion and diversity and all the things, we do a lot of performance in that. But what does it look like to embody the work? And embody the work is saying to somebody, is saying, let's write with me, let's have conversations. And we have had many conversations in the background, but this was also Larry making a space, knowing that he has published many books like this, and said, hey, Dr. ABC, come on in and join us. And so that is amazing. And I see you, Professor Clelia Rodriguez. A is for acknowledgement. And a lot of us, we don't learn to do that. I follow my spirit when I speak. That's just me unapologetically. And I believe we need to say that, because academia teaches us otherwise. It's a constant competition for who is publishing and who is not and all that kind of stuff. And so we have to realize that, that how intentional we have to be. So I want to say thank you for that. I want to say thank you also for community being here. When I see you introducing yourself, I saw names, and I know people, maybe Lionel, our moderator, was maybe wondering, why was I smiling so much? I smiled because of the joy that came out when I saw you said, introduce yourselves, and people were introducing their names. I saw community. Community showed up for us, Larry. Community is here. And I'm just coming from my class this tonight. I don't know if you know, but tonight your webinar is being held in my class. So yes, you're in my classroom. My CTL 5704, all my amazing students are there. And I just came from a class, we're talking about issues in urban school. And one of my students, Elena, was talking about transformative justice. And she underlined the point that transformative justice is community work. That is why some of us are so stressed, because we're trying to do justice by ourselves. But transformative justice is community work. And so when I see community, when I see Ardivan, Professor Dr. Ardivan, when I see Dr. Kashka Watson, when I see Professor Mary Reed, Professor Clelia Rodriguez, I see Deborah Peart, who is not only one of my students, but a colleague at the University of Toronto. I see people and I see community taking the time to show up. I see teachers in Peel District School Board. Thank you. I see you from Simcoe County District School Board. Thank you for that. And I want to share something. The topic, anybody notice my t-shirt? So Lionel, you're going to love this. I was a guest speaker in York Region School Board the other night. Yep. And my topic was, listen to my topic. My topic was talking to parents about talking to your children about racism. So that's my topic. Okay. I walked in, and the principal, amazing principal, had made t-shirts. And this is one of the t-shirts. I want you to remember the title of our book. It says, how can classroom teachers disrupt discrimination and promote hope, foster healing, and inspire joyful learning? I encourage everyone today to take a minute later on to read my post on LinkedIn and Facebook. I had a post today. I talked about that the work of resistance, the work of advocacy, the work of doing this is not only the resisting and the hammer and the sledgehammer work, but it's also the healing work. It's the love work. And I did bring the book, Larry, to the workshop, because I bring the book everywhere. That's me. And I said to them on page 30 of the book, there is a lot of vocabulary page 26. Let me find it. A lot of vocabulary, page 22, sorry. A lot of words about the ABCs of hate. And I was going through this with in my presentation, and I talk about the word homophobia, the word genocide, the word colonize, the word harassment, the word marginalize, the word prejudice, the word slur, the word transphobia. But then I said to them, in that same place, it's a choice to also notice that there's word like justice. There's word like healing. There's word like kindness and love. There's word there that we have to remember. Activism. How do we be intentional about this? So as I got into this, I want to share with you my part of the conversation. And that part of the conversation is surrounding the tips. So I know my teachers are in the house. Larry, you could Lana, you could start my first slide. And I know my teachers are in the house. And I could tell you, I saw one of my teachers I've worked with for the last couple of years. We became real friends from the Ontario Library, School Library Association, Jenny. I see you, Jen. I see you, Jen. And I see you, Jen. And we're talking about the book. She already started engaging in conversation about the book and social media. And I said, what is this book for? If you walk away this evening and you said, what is this book for, Dr. ABC? Because there's a lot of stuff that Larry shared that I'm sure you got. But one of the book from me is also about sharing tools that we can use as educators. Tools to disrupt, tools to dismantle, tools to interrupt, tools to call out, tools to call in, but tools to also make sure our students know we care, we see them. I'm here for you. I'm an advocate. I'm an ally. I'm going to show up for you. I'm going to speak up when you can't speak. That is the role that we are choosing to play. And so the first one of my tips, I want to share some tips with you. The first one of my tip is uncover your unconscious bias. And I'm sure you know many of us, we have gone from the word unconscious because some of this bias is not unconscious, it's conscious. We know it, we know who we are, and we know that we have so much in us to unlearn. And I want to encourage us as educators, as community leaders, that we have to spend the time to unlearn things that have been wired in us. As Larry said, you have to be carefully taught. Many of us was taught at 9/11 how to be afraid of anything that looks like a head wrap, aka an hijab. You are wired. We were wired through the news media. Before 2 weeks of listening to the news, you totally was wired like that. We have to remember, we have to intentionally ask ourselves, why am I scared of Larry? Why am I scared of Dr. ABC? What is the hurt? What is it that's happening? We have to uncover, because I'm going to tell you this, too many of us are trying to do the work of equity and anti-hate and disrupting, but we have not done any disruption within our hearts, within ourselves. I had the privilege of going to Niagara last week, in Niagara on the Lake, for a conference. And I walked into a conference where I was a guest speaker on equity. And the theme for the conference was hearts and minds. I was quite impressed. And maybe they were more impressed that I had the word heart in my slide more than once. Because it is the work. It starts here in who we are. So the next tip I leave with you is to change your mindset. Next slide is your mindset. I can tell you a lot of us, our mindset impact our students. How we see our students, how we see difference. Right now we saw that the York Region Catholic District School Board had a whole thing on CP24 about 2S LGBTQI plus students. Now today, there's a whole thing going around today as we speak, this very minute, on social media about the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board. And so what it is about student voice. It's about students who are saying, hey, I am here. See me. I am hurt. I am feeling the hate within spaces. And so as educators, we have to remember that we have to work at our mindset. You know, I always say to educators, if you have been teaching for 25, 26, 10, 15, 10 years, and you have not examined your pedagogy, you have not examined your practice, you have not examined your presence, how you show up in the classroom, then you are in trouble. I did say that. You have to examine your practice, your pedagogy and your presence. How am I showing up to my students? Next slide. And I want us to remember as we do that, we want to reach our students, develop culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. Saturday morning, I'll be speaking to the librarians, and we're talking about the changing face of the classroom. The changing face of the classroom. And I'm not spending time to us to discuss, well, who is in the classroom? Are they immigrants? Are they this? Are they that? My time is going to be spent saying, our students are here. It's Monday morning. We walk into our school. The face has changed. We are not having a class of the majority white students we used to. How are we making sure we have the tools to reach all our students? And only one. This is not the know-it-all. This is one way. And one way is doing culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. And we have to remember that the foundation of CRRP is holding high expectations for all our students. Next slide. This is one of my favorite ones. Becoming a champion for our students. We need I'm going to simply say our students need champion. Look around your schools. Look around your classrooms. Look around the students who are hurting, who have been victims of hate and bullying, racism, homophobia, Islamophobia. Look what's happening. Larry, I must share this with you. You talk about the SWAT sticker. I was called to a school, I won't say because we were recording, a school in Toronto. This is school, but it was before COVID. So it was maybe 2019 or 2018. And I went to do a workshop, and the principal called me back. And she went to the bathroom, and people came to the bathroom and showed pictures of swastikas all over the school. And it was just bad. But what for me was hurt for me was when she was speaking to me. Then she revealed, I am the principal for this school, Mr. Campbell, and I am Jewish. And my heart broke that a leader in a school is in a space like that and seeing all of this hate, and she is identifying in a certain way. And I think to myself, where are the teachers in the school who are the champions, who are saying to the people who are doing this, you cannot do this. This is not allowed. We will not condone this. I'm going to go into a little bit for a minute with something. I find that when we are trying to call out hate in our schools, I think there's a level of cuteness in how we do call out. And I think we have to be very careful that if you're calling out something wrong, the students, the parents, the teachers, the community members, the security, the bus driver, the custodian, everybody needs to know by your words, your diction, your volume, your energy, your presence, your stand, your physical presence to say, I do not accept this. This is not good. And I think more and more, I want us to understand that we have to be strong. We have to be firm when we are disrupting hate. It is not, it's not like, oh, I ate the cereal. We're not talking about that. Oh, I ate cereal. Fine. We're talking about hate that is harmful. How do we do that? And I see it in the chat, but hashtag bravery, hashtag courageous. We've been using these words a lot. Brave conversation, courageous conversation, showing up, calling out, standing up. How are you doing that? So the next one. So I want us to remember that we have to be champions. Disrupting deficit thinking mentality. We talk about that already. Next one, cultivate the language of hope. Thank you so much for that, Lionel. We have to cultivate the language of hope. I'm going to tell you why I'm so big on this one, everyone. Our students are looking to us. When I go into schools and see incidents on CP24 and it involves a little boy, a little girl, or a little person in grade 1, immediately I say to myself, what can I offer this child? And I have to offer this child protection, love, care, hope. I want you to understand that is why I speak the way I do. There are persons you go into certain spaces and they want to always hear you say, I'm going to disrupt, I'm going to tear down, I'm going to burn down. All of that is important. All of that is important, but never you forget, when we have persons who are hurting, the work of equity, the work of resistance, the work of disrupting hate is also the work of healing, the work of kindness, the work of love, the work that says without saying it, I see you. The work that says without saying it, I got your back. The work that says without saying it, I am here for you. It's a look, it's an energy, it's a vibe. How are we doing that as educators? How are we doing that? Then ties with number 7, everybody. Care for our students. Care for our students. Care for our students. Number 8, ask yourself, who am I teaching? That's a very big one that many of us are still wrestling with. Do we know our students? And I want to call us to action, everybody. I see you, Hunter, in the box. You're ahead of me. You're in my head. You're ahead of me. You said, number 9, you said move from awareness to action. There's a lot of us, Pamela, who are stuck at awareness. I have been very firm with many of my communities, and I see my community here. I can tell you I've worked with maybe 12 school boards, and I've said to school boards, that in 2020, you invited me to speak about anti-Black racism, and we talked about awareness. In 2021, you invited me back to speak, and we talked some more about awareness. I said, you cannot invite me back to speak on the topic of awareness. We have moved on, and I know many of you have not moved on, but we have to. We are in a hurry. It's a matter of urgency. And for those who maybe wonder when I say the matter of urgency, I want to tell you, I teach change management as a leadership course. And I subscribe to John Cotter's change management model. And one of the first steps of change management is establish the urgency. Establish the urgency. This is textbook. This is textbook of change. This is not equity. This is leadership now. Textbook. One of the first things is to establish urgency of the change. Why are we changing? Why? Establish the urgency. And the final tip, develop solidarity and allyship. I see Professor Mary Reed from the University of Toronto in the Department of Curriculum, Teaching and Learning, where myself and Larry also work. She's our colleague. And I remember when I was doing my series, and one of the biggest topics she wanted us to focus on was how we work and walk in solidarity. How we work and walk in solidarity. I'm going to leave you with that, because right now in the room are workers. Right now in the room are workers. My TC candidates in 5704, 26 of you. You are workers. In a couple months from now, you will be teachers in the field. You are workers. Professors who are here, you are workers. Publishers, community members, I think I see Kimberly Cato, psychologist, who is going to be one of my speakers in one of my class coming up soon. You are a worker. How are we going to work and walk in solidarity to make sure we do better? We want to create a better world. If I ask you all, like a beauty pageant response, you're all going to say you want a more beautiful world. It's a beauty pageant response. You're going to say you want a better world. How will you create a better world? So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I know we're going to open for a few questions. I know we have a few minutes for a few questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for the support. My heart is full. My heart is full. I'm satisfied. My heart is full. I'm satisfied. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Beautiful.
Great. Yes. Thank you very much to both of you. Andrew, I didn't get a chance to do an introduction for you, but I think your words introduced you very well. So, and your passion. So thank you so much for that. And I apologize for not cutting you off, but it didn't seem like the right thing to do.
I know. Am I on, Lionel?
You are, yeah.
No, I just want 20 seconds because I slapped my wrist. I didn't give a shout out to my niece, Rachel. Rachel Stein, I dedicated the book on my behalf to her.
Yes.
Andrew dedicated the book as well to colleagues who believe in this work.
Yes.
But the main thing is Rachel's a great teacher and is certainly a great niece. But she invited me into her classroom, and the kids gave me great insights. This is a grade 7 classroom. The books they read, the chapter about responding to literature. You know, they did fictitious journals. They did text messages, fictitious text messages. And I invented an activity called the 10-sentence book report to hate literature. So I have to give a shout out to those kids. And one more thing, just 10 more seconds. I was reading a novel this morning. Surprise, surprise, Larry was reading a book. And this was new to me, Andrew. They had the word community, and the word unity is in the word community. So I made note of that. And maybe people have that on a poster, but the word unity is community. And you started by talking about community, which is always my mantra when I meet my students. But I think I think it sort of synthesizes what you talked about. Okay.
Great. Just a reminder to folks, we do have a couple minutes for questions, and I've grabbed a few questions from the chat. At the end, we also have an offer and a quick draw for an ebook of Andrew and Larry's book. So please stay to the end so that you can be part of that. But maybe, gentlemen, I can just pull a couple questions that have come from the chat, because I know it's been flying by, and I think we set the record for the most number of emojis at a Pembroke webinar. So both of you get a gold star for that. That's very impressive. So but I did notice, though, there's kind of a theme starting to emerge in some of the questions of, you know, as you both of you were talking, there's sort of this reflection on, okay, I'm with you, but what do I do? I think it's, Andrew, it's that piece of moving from awareness to action. So for example, Karen asked the question about halfway through the webinar, how do we deal with parents who oppose us? What do we say? So that seems more than, yeah, I've got the tips and I'm working on the tips, but what's my next step?
I could jump in there. And the next step is, this is going to sound simple, but it's just the real truth. It's that we need to be having conversations with our parents. I realize over the last 4 years, where there's an influx of conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion, decolonization, all those kind of conversations. And I have worked with, as I said to you, many school boards. And I remember more than 5 or 6 times saying to superintendents, saying to principals, saying to leaders in the school board, can you have this conversation with the parents as well? I said, you're having it with teachers. We're having it at system level. We're having it with teachers, and we're having assemblies in the school, and we're having conversation with our students. And it is going home to us, to our parents, but it's going home in bits and pieces. It's going home on the lips of our children who are saying, well, there's a person came to school today and they were gay, mommy. Or there's a person came to school today and there was a black man and we never had a black man before, or something like that. And so it becomes, what is going on in school? And the parents are concerned, curious, but there's no great conversation. And so I'm encouraging more and more educators, principals, teachers to have those conversations with parents. And I think I can also safely say there are also schools that seems to be scared of having the conversation. I've seen it where they've asked me to be like a parent conversation, and they'll say to me, do you want to take questions, Dr. ABC? Like they're almost protective of me. And I do understand the reason why, but I said, absolutely. I said, I don't want to speak for 1 hour to a staff, to a group of parents without giving them 20 minutes to ask me questions. And that has always been a model. So we need to have more conversations with our parents. We're not having conversations. We're sending them newsletters. We're sending them a little thing. We're sending them a link from the school board. We're actually not engaging parents in real conversations. There's more of that is needed.
So if I understand this right from the book, then are you saying that, and Larry mentioned this earlier about having brave spaces. The brave spaces just aren't in the classroom or in the school, but as I think it was Cecilia just said, do parents need classes to learn about how to do this? Is that the brave space you're talking about there?
You want to go, Larry? You want me to jump in here quickly?
No, you can continue.
No, they don't need classes to do that. But we're talking about topics that are new. We're talking about topics that are a little bit more expansive than the usual. We're talking about how do we have those conversations, right? It's new. It is new. We have to remember, I always talk about, especially towards LGBTQIA+. I say it and it rolls off my tongue this way, but we only used to say LGBT or LGB. Yeah. I remember that. I never use the word, I always say this, I never use the word queer until I came to Canada. I did not know what the word queer was. It's not a Jamaican word I used. Now they're using the word queer in Jamaica, but it wasn't a word I've ever used in Jamaica. When I came here in 2008, that's when I heard the word queer. So it's about learning. It's about growing. The conversation is not an accusation. The conversation is not to say to parents, you are behind. The conversation is not to say to parents, you are not doing well. The conversation is saying to parents, how can we as a community develop more cultural competence? Because I'm going to tell you why. In our schools, when I go to this parents event, I see diversity like you never believe. And there's a learning. There's a learning. Today, last thing I'll say, today I say to my students, when I came to Canada in 2008, I have never, ever been in a school before where I had Asian students. Yeah. Believe it. My first set of teaching Asian students was in 2011. My first set of being in a school where I could walk into the building with my own identity as a Black gay man was 2011. There is a journey that we all are a part of. And it's about learning and unlearning. And as we learn, we appreciate. As we learn, we give more respect. As we learn, we gain more respect. As we unlearn, we understand the other more. As we unlearn, we understand difference more. As we unlearn, we appreciate difference more. And as we unlearn, we will come to the place where we celebrate each other more. Because that is what is causing the tension, the difference, and the you and I and the in-between. So we have to spend that time to learn about others.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And your book captures that. And maybe this is just to build on a comment that Pamela's made here around the failure of the Education Act to incorporate the Aboriginal perspectives, and that it's been identified that they are an at-risk population. Now you do talk about that in your book a little bit, and I know it didn't come up a lot today, but maybe, I know we're getting near the end, but I think it might be worth it if you have some thoughts on that to share as well.
Larry, want to go with that?
I am going to let you go. Sorry, Andrew.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. Definitely. And I know Pamela. Thank you so much, Pamela, Lynn, Chris, John, for saying that. There is so much for me, and this is why I hold on to so much hope and joy. It's easy in this work to feel like you're never gaining much ground. It's easy. I am preparing to have a speech to a group of students in one particular school board on June the 1st about LGBTQ. And then just this week, it's two other issues with two school boards. And as Pam is saying here, it's looking at who is at risk and why are they at risk, and looking at how we have been doing this and how do we stop. How do we work within the system to really say to the system, you are continually doing harm. You are continually doing harm. We have come so much to hear about the red dress. Do we actually care about the red dress? We have come so much to perform and recite. I personally I think I'm reaching a point where I don't know how I'm going to feel a year from now about land acknowledgement, because it's getting, and I'm saying this on a recording, it's getting on top of my nerves. How when I go to, not everywhere, but certain events, and somebody just get up and just hold the mic and say, we're going to acknowledge the land, and then in 5 seconds, as if nothing ever, you never hear anything else about Indigenous. Absolutely nothing else. Because we have turned that into another performance. We have turned into another performance because we are so qualified, Lionel. We're so qualified, Pamela. We're so qualified, Pamela, that we know the right words to say. And I'm going to say this very, very strongly. That is why we have to check on ourselves. When I said to you that slide, when I said to you, the first slide, I said, uncover our bias and understand who we are, our mindset. If we do not be careful, even us, we get caught up into doing equity, doing inclusion, doing anti-hate work, doing anti-Asian hate work, doing anti-Black racism. We get so caught up in the doing that we are not even anywhere near the living and the being. And it's a challenge because we're in space, and many of us, myself and Larry, we're in academia where I think maybe Larry's way ahead of me when it comes to that, is learning there. But I'm new to the game, and I am learning that it sounds cute outside in certain space, but when you get into the belly of academia, you learn certain things and you realize that we are taught this performative language and terminology because they look good on your resume. There's nobody right now, Lionel, no teacher, who is going to be promoted to any leadership position without a question about diversity and inclusion. So you know what happens? We go learn about diversity and inclusion. We go learn how to answer that interview question. We are being trained and coached how to answer an equity question. We are being trained and coached how to talk about First Nations, the red dress, missing and murdered women. We are being trained and coached how to say it in a paragraph that it sounds so rich, we are believed. But after that, we close the file like this. We put a paper clip over it, and we are done. So we have to embody the work. And thank you, Pamela, for bringing that up. Thank you, Pamela, for saying that. We have to do it in our spaces.
Yeah, and I think that speaks volumes, what you're saying, Andrew, around why the both of you wrote the book. We could go for another hour just of what's in the book that allows you to take you. I think how you wrote this was wherever you are as an educator and whatever you're doing, and say, oh, I can use that. Oh, I can use that. I can bring that particular survey to my kids. And it's full of ideas. And I know we're almost out of time, folks, and we do have a couple things to finish with, but just one last question on the book, because, when someone gets that, are they reading it from front to back? Or, the tips are at the end, and yet you could start with those, and the activities and kind of how they're laid out, you could do those anywhere. So do either of you have any insight how we should approach the book as we get it?
My answer is teachers know what their needs in the classroom are, and they know their students. So I think any of these things can be a starting point. The question that I ask, why do people hate? Put that on your smartboard. How are kids going to answer that? And then from there, you can scaffold it. So the table of contents helps, and Kat did a brilliant job of articulating that. But I think that, it's true of all the Pembroke books, because I'm very fond of Mary and her books, but I think it's a dipping kind of book. Oh, there's quotations. I think that's something really important. So what is the text that's going to help me unpack? And then there's information that I could use to support me. We give them support, but I think it's a dipping kind of book. And it depends on grade level, depends on the starting point for the issues that the students have had, and then scaffold it. One lesson on why do people hate is not going to move you forward for activism. No. So,
different place. And I will just quickly, because I know our time is up, I'll just quickly say, I started in one of my classes that I'm sharing the book and using, I just started with chapter 6. Because I wanted to start from Brave Conversation with Professor Ardivan Izadarad worked with me on. I started with chapter 6. And so there are different ways, and we are going to go back from chapter 6 to look at something else. So it's useful in so many different areas and spaces, and it's a resource. It's another tool. And it's funny because as you ask those questions, I'm sitting here thinking, there's so much more that we need to write. Pamela, as talk about the seed. How are we going to plant? We're planted that. Are we going to grow that? Water that? There's so much more conversation that we can have, and I trust and hope we'll have more opportunities to do that. So
I really hope so.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
feel like we've just scratched the surface, and I'll let both of you have the final word here to close us out in a second. But I'll just remind folks that you should have your screen might have filled up with a couple of things right now. We do have at Pembroke Publishers a $5 off for your next purchase. If you use the code STH for Stop the Hate 23, and you add that code just as you go through the checkout, so you can get $5 off the purchase of your book. Larry mentioned about a book list. You can access those booklets from his website, Dr. Larry Reads, and but it's also just been there, and you can just click on it and download it. It's there. I will include that tomorrow in the email that comes out that has the link to the recording. So if you'd like to share that with others, please feel free to forward that email on and let other folks. They can come in. It's free to watch, and they can enjoy the recording just as we have over the last hour. And then just last, we have a free ebook for someone in our audience that's been with us. And so it's called we call it the lucky draw. And what it does is it loads up, and we're just going to spin all the names of everyone, and we'll see who pops up for an ebook. And it looks like it's picked a name. So they've changed this format, so it's all new to me here. So we have Jamila B as is the winner of our ebook. So congratulations. We will be in contact with you tomorrow, and someone from Pembroke will give you all the link and everything. So you have a winner of our ebook, which is great. So I know on behalf of everyone, if I can just say thank you both to Andrew and Larry, and I'll leave the last words for you to close us out, and then I'll just close us down.
I'll just go quickly to say enough love. That's my last word, enough love. Enough love to everyone. Thank you. I felt the love, and thank you for being here. You showed up, and it's important you show for us, show for yourself, and show for others. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And mine is a thank you. Thank you, Karen, for your wise comments and your supportive comments. And of course, Asim put a message. So it's a lot of thank you. But I think my final words is you've got to be carefully taught. I think it's about teaching. Where do they learn hate? Where do they understand hate? You've got to be taught to love and hate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Night, everyone. We'll see you next time.